Morning, everyone. Welcome to Crack the Hack Day 2. Appreciate everyone joining in today. For everybody who was on yesterday's session, we outlined all of the rules and the way this game is going to work. So I'm not going to rehash all of that today. However, if you missed yesterday's session and are interested in that information because you're confused about how any of this flows, you can go to cthevent.com and see the links to the session from yesterday so that you can review the information that was there. Today, we've got a super exciting presentation around the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. Going to talk a little bit about what that framework is and why it's important. But before we jump into that with our lead presenter, we want to talk about the game board. And if you've checked the leaderboard on cthevent.com, you'll know that in the lead is R310, a D3D. I bet you that means something, and I'm not slick enough to decipher it. If Bob or Amber, you can decipher it, then you can let me know. But at any rate, this person has 230 points. They're leading the game. This is our lead hacker as of right now. So make sure you get your points, get your questions answered, 10 sessions, and join in the fun for the special offers that we have going. And your name could be presented at the beginning of the leaderboard tomorrow. So next, I'd like to present your industry expert for today, Bob Thomas. Bob has a wealth of knowledge about all things technology and cybersecurity related. I hesitate ever to find a question that somebody can put in front of Bob that he can't knock out of the park or find an answer for them. Bob has been with Cybersecurity / Connect Computer for, geez, it's been 20 years, Bob. You're muted, Bob.
Yeah, I'm probably 20 years working with in conjunction with Connect, but for Connect and Kyber, it's like 16 or 17.
So that's a pretty good run overall. At any rate, Bob's going to today walk you through our information around the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, and specifically starting with the identify tenant of the framework. Again, we talked about that yesterday. If you want to review yesterday's presentation, so I won't review too much of it today. From here, I'm going to hand over to Bob, and Bob, show is all yours.
Thanks very much, Mike. I appreciate it, and thanks very much to everybody for joining the call today. I'm not going to bore you with statistics about me, and I have been with the company for a long time. I think maybe what's important about my background, in addition to technology, is I came from a finance background originally, so. I'm not just aware of technology and how it works in people's businesses, but I can understand exactly how the money might make sense, how to budget, how OPEX, operation expense versus capital expenditure works, and depreciation, all those little idiosyncrasies that kind of make the business tick. I've done them myself. I was a controller for 5 years, so I've done all those things, and I can lend some help, some guidance, some information to folks about that. My current hats at Kyber are virtual chief information officer and chief information security officer. What that means is that I'm trying to help our clients make the best use of their money, their resources, their time to make their business run the best it can and in the most secure fashion. That's really my objective as I go through things. One thing before we kick things completely off, there's part of the game is a quick question that you'll see up on the screen. I don't know how Amber comes up with this stuff, but it's great. In the chat box, we want everybody to put in the month and day of their birthday. Like, well, what the heck do I have to do that for? Look, somebody's going to get a cake, and it's not a cake, but you're going to get $50 because somebody's going to get drawn automatically, randomly out
Bob,
of
this
that.
is the month and day of your birthday. They're guessing the month and day of your birthday.
Oh my God, that's what they're doing?
Yes.
You know, I looked up on the screen when we went through this, and I'm like, why did you put my birthday up there?
No, so let me clarify this. I just want to make sure that the prize winner is going to be whoever gets closest to guessing the month and day of Bob's birthday. So not the year, just the month and day. We don't need the year. And you'll get a $50 gift card at the end of this. If you can either use the chat functionality or the Q&A functionality. And I just want to add too, if you have any questions while Bob is talking throughout this session, feel free to throw that in the chat and Q&A as well, and we'll pull them at the end. Or if Mike feels that it would be appropriate to interrupt Bob, like I'm doing right now, he can do that too. So let me just interject. So Bob's month and day of his birthday.
That's hilarious. And after Mike gave that big buildup, if I have the answer to all the questions, I don't even know the right question to ask in that case.
It's all good.
Oh my God.
Oh, good, Bob.
Okay. Moving on. One of the things that we, Mike gave a background of the NIST, National Institution for Standards and Technology yesterday. And, it's a government body that has been put together to develop standards. And part of that is developing the framework to help small to mid-sized businesses better protect themselves. The links that are here, and I believe I'm right about this, Amber, you're going to post these into the chat box so that people don't have to scribble them down.
Yep, I can definitely do that.
That would be great. I think the most important thing to know about this particular slide and the NIST program is that these are the types of resources that we're using to monitor every client's network and their business in order to make sure we're doing the best that we can do for the small to mid-sized business. Congress enacted NIST and gave them a responsibility to they wanted them to disseminate consistent and clear, concise, and probably more important than anything, actionable items and resources for small businesses. I think they felt that the small business was maybe being left out and the enterprises had plenty of resources. They didn't need this kind of guidance and help. So that's how this was really put together. All the resources that are in these sites are completely free. It draws from federal agency information and provides it to small to mid-sized businesses. There are nonprofits that contribute to this. There's for-profit businesses. This is a kind of collusion of information that's being gathered and provided for all sorts of companies. It can be, we've got clients that are in the Department of Defense space. This framework is very important to them because they're bound by it in order to follow it. And they've got other standards and compliancy that it falls in line with. You should probably know that the website does not provide assistance, operational assistance for companies, but it does provide information for federal agencies and even some nonprofit contacts that will be able to offer assistance in getting you improvement in your security posture. Any small business that is affected by a threat, by an incident, it should be, I know people might believe that it's not going to go anywhere, nobody's going to pay attention to my breach or my hack. It should be reported to IC3. That's the Crime Commission, and that Internet Crime Complaint Center is run by the FBI, and I think it should be standard practice. If somebody gets breached, you automatically go to that site, and it's relatively painless. It's probably 3 different categories, I believe. I looked at it again this morning. They just want to know what happened, how, not exactly how they got in, but they're really interested in trying to understand exactly what was lost, whether it be data or it's financial. I think those links in the chat will help you. You can do some research. It's not complicated stuff. They boiled it down, and I think it is good for the information for you to have. And let's talk a little bit about the goal of what that cybersecurity framework means on the next slide. It's it sounds strange that it's not a compliancy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what it really is. You have to align yourself if you're not covered by some sort of compliancy, like I mean HIPAA, in the medical field, for instance, that you align yourself with a program. And this NIST cybersecurity framework, that CSF, gives you those guidelines. And I think the first is you've got to figure out how you spend your money, your resources, in order to put into place the best program possible as far as a strategy is concerned. This is, the framework is a tool that will give you guidance and help you comply with HIPAA, GDPR, NYDFS, all these different framework compliances out there. But it's a great starting point that you can use to get your baseline and then figure out your strategy, not just from a money standpoint, but where the money is best going to be spent. This is all about best practices and how to get your business to the next level, both from an operational standpoint, which, we're talking a lot about risk and recovery here. If you have an outage, what's it going to take to recover? That's one of the tenets of this whole cybersecurity framework. What path am I going to take to get my systems and my business back up and running? So best practice is a very important feature of exactly how you run your business and how you're structured and what kind of plan you have in place. And I think the other major thing that the CSF gives us is it's a standard. The slide says common language. I consider it a standard in the industry for all types of business and risk management in order to coordinate an effort to make yourself more secure. I think that's the important thing that you should draw from this, is that this is a standard and everybody can follow it. It may not be followed exactly the same way, but it is the guideline that everybody's looking for. And I think the next slide will show us why should you care about this. And I think we see this in the newspapers, online, on the radio, on TV every single day. We've got cyber criminals. They're making the best effort to try to hack people's networks. It's really quite amazing what the impression or the expectation people have of how a hacker operates. And a hacker, it's somebody, I'd have to say, unscrupulous, trying to gain unauthorized access to something, data, software, hardware, systems in general. And we're trying to find out the best way to protect against those people cracking in. And that's really what we consider our job. What do they want to get? Everybody thinks they want their data. Some people, their data, obviously, if you're without it, it's an incredible inconvenience. It may put you out of business. We all get that. Everybody tries to understand what they're going to do with the data. You look at something like the Equifax attack. Millions and hundreds of millions of records released out into the wild because Equifax gets hacked. What happens once they get the data? They get people's personally identifiable information. Next thing you know, it's for sale on the dark web. How do you get to the dark web? There's you have to have a special browser and all these things, but people go looking for data to make somebody's life difficult or very complicated is really what ends up happening. I think ransomware has become, I hate to say that, the industry standard, but that's almost what it's become. It's had its ebbs and flows. Ransoms were hate to say by today's standard level, they were very cheap back in the day. The number was $600. That's, everybody says, that's how much we think we can get for the people to unlock their data, because it's been hijacked and it's been encrypted and you can't open any of your files. But then once they saw that they could infiltrate much larger organizations, all of a sudden, I think the light bulb went off and they said, wow, we cracked into Arizona Ice-T's network and we encrypted everything in their environment, every server they had, and they couldn't produce Ice-T. For weeks, they couldn't. They were locked out of their systems. They had to rebuild all their systems. The alternative was pay millions in ransom in order to unlock, maybe unlock. Nobody's going to say that you're definitely going to get your data back and that they're not still sitting in there in your systems. I think that's so, and I think probably the one that follows on from all of this is reputation. Is it going to ruin my business reputation because people found out I've been hacked and my name's in the newspaper, my company name's in the newspaper? Is my name mud at that point? And you have to realize, out of all of this, nobody is being handpicked. They're not being targeted. It's not how the hacking game or ransomware game works. These are sophisticated people. There's even a chain of command with this stuff, and they're writing computer programs trying to find the easiest path into someone's network. And if they can't get in, their system basically shuts down and says, give me another one. And it will find another, in the world of how all this works, another internet address, an IP address of somebody else's network, somebody else's connection to the internet, Comcast, Cox, Optimum, whoever it happens to be. That is their method. It's completely programmatic. It's completely random. And they're just looking for the easiest way in. Let's talk a little bit about the framework itself and just how this first phase works as part of the NIST cybersecurity framework. Mike went through all 5 tenets yesterday: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Each one of these, it's drawn as a circle for a reason. Obviously, it's circular because we started identify and you follow the path through. We're focused today on identify. The follow-on in the next couple of days, we'll go over protect and detect tomorrow, respond and recover the day after that. But we want to make sure that we are figuring out what's important inside your world. And that's really why we're focused on identify today. You have to have a baseline. You have to figure out what's important, what's valuable to you. And the framework breaks it down. There's a lot of stuff, what they call controls, behind this framework. But if you break it down into these components, it makes it simpler. It makes it more identifiable and reasonable. I think that's the structure of it. Just so everybody's on the same page, I hope we all are. Tuesday, we're going through identify. That's where we are in the cycle. Tomorrow, we're going to have I'm probably as excited as anybody else to see the live demonstration that our folks are going to do in Kraken and email box, and exactly how it's done, and then how we can figure out that it's been done, because a lot of this stuff is happening under the covers, with a detection, and then how they're going to remedy the situation, how they're going to notify, alert, and basically disable the function, and then respond and recover is going to happen with a live panel discussion on Thursday, which I'm equally excited to hear about. So that's really how the week's going to break down. So I mentioned, we're in the identify phase. You can't do anything to get started until you understand what's at risk and what you have in your possession. And there's a lot of place we can go with this slide. It's you have to know what you have and what's worth protecting. That's the most important thing. And you have to, this is a really interesting question. Do you have an inventory of external information systems? And if the answer is no, okay, if I don't have it, how do I get it? What do I have to do? Is it vulnerable? Have I tested it to see if it's vulnerable? Especially, we talk about external information systems. That means it's accessible from the outside world, or you're accessing somebody else's system. A lot of this, and I'm going to talk about this on the next slide in a minute, but you've got to collect this data to understand what's important in your business. Everybody, I think, has the same impression when they start. Hey, I got a bunch of computers. I got some stuff in the closet. Maybe it has servers. Maybe I've got stuff in the cloud. I'm connected to the internet. I got this firewall widget. I got some Wi-Fi, and I got some printers. That's all I have. Well, okay, I agree. That's part of it. But you have to figure out, how do I control all that stuff? Who's got responsibility, and what's contained in that stuff, I think is more important than, what piece of hardware is sitting on a desk in front of someone. And these, these are the classifications and the assets that you should all consider. And I actually, I went through the slides again, last night, again this morning, and I looked at this, and I've got others that I want to talk about. Data's obvious. It's intangible because you can't see you can't reach out and touch it, but of course you can print it to paper and you can say, oh yeah, here, I got this invoice, and yeah, I understand that we build these people for something. That's all well and good. Off-the-shelf software, well, okay, off-the-shelf software, unless it's customized, unless you've spent significant time training folks, is replaceable. It's important because it runs your business. But I think that customization piece, do you have it backed up? When was the last time it was modified and backed up? A lot of people will, they'll get a programmer in, they'll make some code changes, and holy cow, we never backed it up. And when do you find that out? At the worst possible moment. Integrated technology, which is probably one of the most important things that are going on today. We're integrating systems all over the place. I mean, if you saw how many systems that we've got talking to each other at our place, you probably wouldn't believe it. Yeah, many of them are from the same provider, ConnectWise, but they were built as different systems, and they're integrating with some on-premise systems at our place, some external at service providers, all over the place. I mean, we probably have 20 different things talking in there. If that system breaks, if that system's hijacked, that's an asset that's we can't replace, and we need to get our arms around recovery. As I mentioned before, devices, desktops, laptops, tablets, like printers, firewalls. Yeah, it's less important because it's all replaceable stuff. It's what's contained in it. And the other things that I started to think about, it was on the last slide briefly, is supply chain. Do you have an alternative supplier when your supplier gets hacked and they can't ship merchandise? They are out of touch with their warehouse because their warehouse management system is down. When it comes to supply chain and distribution, that's a really big thing. I mean, we could extend this to schools. Look at what happened to Hartford Public Schools the first day of school. Yeah, their system got hacked. It got ransomware, so everybody's data was encrypted. But what data was so important that they couldn't operate that day? The bus schedule. The busing system was what actually took the brunt of it, so that they couldn't operate because nobody driving a bus knew where to go to pick up any of the kids. That's what crippled that system that particular day. And that's all it takes, is one of those things happening. So I think on the next slide, maybe you've already been thinking of this as I've been talking, but I think we'd like you to put in the chat box, what's the most important asset that you need to secure in your organization? And data's a wide open, that's an easy one. There ought to be something specific. Is it financial data? Is it customer data? Is it, some vendor contracts, because you've got these specialty contracts? What's important to you? What is the most important thing to you that you really have to secure and you can't live without on a, let's say, a day in and day out basis? Thanks very much for posting those in there, folks. So let's talk a little bit about how this whole risk assessment works, because I said you got to start somewhere. You gather up your assets, you figure out what they're worth. Now you have to figure out what the risks are. And now that you've figured out what's important, okay, now is the stuff really protected? Now this is a scatter chart that you see up on the screen. I'm colorblind, so the whole thing looks the same to me, which is not really that great, but nevertheless, I'm going to go left to right, lighter to darker, because darker is probably for everybody else red. But we're trying to figure out exactly what's at risk and what has to be fixed. So we run a risk assessment and we're asking questions interactively with business owners and C-level personnel and line managers, depending on who's got the knowledge. And we go through an assessment. It's a Q&A session, and we're trying to figure out what securities, what controls are in place. And then our next step is, okay, we've figured out the answers to all the questions, and it produces a scatter chart like this to say, okay, what's at risk? What gaps do we have? The slide says gap analysis. We're trying to figure out where you should be and where you need to be from a protection standpoint. And that's really the most important thing to get out of that risk assessment, because now you've got not a plan yet, but you know what your problems are, what issues are existing in your network, and where do we go from here? There's a perfect example. We see this all the time. Do you have redundancy across critical systems to provide for continued operations in case of a service disruption? Now, service disruption doesn't mean a server went down. It could mean your internet provider went down, but a critical component is you getting email in and out, because that's how you get orders. You getting out to a supplier's warehouse system to determine if they have stock and what their pricing is and can they ship the product today. It could be linked, heck, your accounting system could be external to you. Maybe it is on your server and the server is offline, or could have the problem Microsoft had a few weeks ago. Their authentication system went down. You couldn't get to email if you had logged out because it wouldn't allow you to log back in. It's those disruptions that you have to have a plan for, and some are more difficult to plan for than others. I give you that. But at the end of the day, every one of those ones that has, this is where it should be, but here's where we are today, that's a gap. And we need to understand what those gaps are. How do we remediate them? And then you have to share them with a board, C-level, ownership, to determine, okay, we've got, red items, I'll call them, on the right-hand side there. These are critical. This is what it's going to take to remedy it, both from a process standpoint and a money standpoint. How do we do it? How important is it? How soon can we do it? And then you have to develop the plan. And that's really what comes after the assessment. You've got your gaps, you've determined what's most critical in those gaps, and now you've got to figure out typically a phased approach to get from point A to point B. And that's really where we're going with this next slide. Is you don't know where to go to if you don't know where you've been. You've got to figure out a path. In most instances, you can't do it all at once. It's unrealistic to say, oh, we're going to fix all the problems at once and we're going to make this whole thing go away. Well, first of all, it's probably not possible. Whether personnel, resources, even if you outsource it, there's money constraints, timing, all of those things play into this. And then yeah, okay, you fixed a bunch of stuff, but what new stuff has been introduced into the environment that may also pose vulnerability? So you've got to constantly be measuring, and that's what we're trying to do here. Is we've got all these different categories, we've got critical items that have to be addressed. All users are informed and trained, top of the list. That should be a standard in today's world, that employees have to be trained and tested with respect to cybersecurity. It is probably the big thing out there that we don't see enough of. So there's all of these categories, and then you've got to determine exactly how do we continue to measure what's important in this month, what's important in this quarter. How do we move the ball forward, I think, is the real important thing here. You know, we said on this little calendar, yep, we're going to do employee awareness training. We know that's a critical item because we saw it on our risk assessment report that we put together. Okay, this is targeted for right now, you know, Q3, Q4. We got to get off the schneid on that. What's next? Well, we're going to put one of those managed detection and response tools in so that somebody's watching our stuff, watching our network from a security operations center, because we hear that catching it early is a great way of trying to reduce the impact of a ransomware hit, an email hijacking, any of these awful events. You know, there's people out there that, you know, they've got goals, and they're a very mature security company. You know, they've got cybersecurity top of mind. They're tracking it, you know, using you know, sheets like this that are measuring what's important, when we're going to do it. They're budgeting exactly for when these things, you know, everybody calls them KPIs, key performance indicators. These are all important pieces that correlate to that cybersecurity framework that we've been talking about. And we need, you know, you need to look, you know, as that scattergram showed us, you've got to look at a lot of pieces. You know, some are going to be good, some are going to be okay, and then some are going to be problematic. You've got to have all the pieces of the security bottle covered. And I think you probably should realize that by doing, you know, structured budgeting and planning like we're showing on the screen here, you've got to identify trends, and you're doing you're having informed decisions because you've got data, and that's really what's important. And what we're trying to get everybody to do is continuously improve. I mean, that should be everybody's objective. You know, you open the can, it's not going to be perfect right at the start. You got to mix in some spices. You got to do some work in order to get from point A to point B. And following the standards guideline will get you there. But as I said, in a phased-in approach, excuse me. You know, there's tools. You know, we've got a bunch of tools at our disposal that we implement at our clients to make sure that they're as secure as possible, and that they're alerting us if anything looks fishy. That's important to know. Technology will help you. You've got to figure out, based on those risks and the categories that we looked at before, where am I going to get the biggest bang for the buck? What security holes do I have to plug? What's the best benefit I'm going to get by spending some money? And which category is it going to plug? You have to know where you are, determine where you are, and what's needed still. We call it defense in depth. That's our strategy for, let's say, stacking tools that find and are responsible for uncovering different issues. One tool will never do it. That's not the way things work, because hackers are constantly evolving. But we try to make things harder and harder for them. Just as I said before, trying to get people to move on to the next one. See who the easiest person is to crack in, and you don't want to be that person. And then as part of our programs, we're doing testing. Yeah, we do vulnerability scanning. We're doing it every 90 days. What are we doing right after that? We're doing penetration tests once a year to make sure that those vulnerabilities have been sealed and that there's no way to crack in from the outside. We're doing, the screen says social engineering. People, well, I just call it testing. We're trying to test employees. Yeah, are we trying to trick them? Yeah, we're trying to trick them. We're trying to make sure that they are paying close attention specifically to emails, looking at attachments, trying to make a decision. Do we open it? If it slips past a spam filter, what do I do? If somebody asks me to wire money, why are they telling me to wire it to a different address? Why do those things happen? And that comes with testing and training. And those things go hand in hand. If people fail the testing, we give them remedial training. They got to go back to the start. That's how it works. That's the best way to make your collective group not be the biggest risk takers, but to be a defense against people trying to get inside your network. They're more knowledgeable. They'll be able to help and defend you better. You've got to look at other things. You know, you could have custom developed software. I mean, not just off the shelf and customized, full on custom developed. What happens if something goes awry with that? Somebody hijacks it? That's one thing. What happens if some code gets in there and it doesn't work? You know, these are things, how are you keeping it up to date? How are you patching it? How are you making sure that's secure and that that's not an open conduit into your world? Those are things that are really, really critical in making sure that you're constantly improving your world. And I think, you know, these are I think these are important things for small businesses to realize as far as tips to remember. You've got to realize that this framework was put together not for enterprises. This was built specifically, and there's actually two different levels. I didn't even talk about this. There are two different levels of it. There is a small business version, and then there's the full cybersecurity framework. So you can kind of build on it. You can look at that. It's like 55 questions, let's say, and determine, does that give me all the protections, or at least a very good start to control access to data, the security of my data, the security of my systems, the resiliency of them. I think those are all important things about the framework and why it was developed in the first place. So it makes people think about cybersecurity and just how important it is to protect your data. There's no reason to start from scratch. There just isn't. This is already developed. As I said before, this is free content. It's, you know, you can absorb as much as you want of it. We gave you the links to it. It's a very easy process to get started, to understand where you are and what's important in your specific world. There's tools out there. I don't want to say easy to use tools, but there's tons of tools out there. You should have something in place. Everybody should have, I would have to say at this point, a great backup and recovery system. They're not abusively priced. They include both on-site and off-site automatically if you've got the right technology. I think that's an important tool to make sure if we have a site failure, everything's inside that building. You know, back in the old days, our tapes were in there too. And I think you have to look, you know, at least annually, how am I going to budget for next year to, you know, close those gaps that we talked about, that gap analysis, to determine how do we get from point A to point B and making ourselves more secure. It's just not, this isn't a once, yeah, we're going to check the box and yep, we put it behind us. This is a continuous improvement every day. You know, if you looked at how many new pieces of malware and ransomware were developed every day, you wouldn't believe the number. But security, I don't believe secure is a destination. None of us in our organization do. It's just a way of life. It's a way of running your business. It's got to be done in order to protect what's most important to you. I think that's really that's really all I can say about it. It's critical. Okay, who guessed what my birthday was? Is anybody? There might be people on this that actually know what my birthday is, but
I have the winning answer. The guess was December 25th. So somebody guessed Christmas Day. You're not a Christmas baby, but December 28th is only 3 days away. So the winner of the $50 gift card is I'm a Good Guy. So hacker name, I'm a Good Guy. You will be reached out from Amber, and she will award you with your prize at the end of the week, I believe.
That's a really good guess. I've got 3 friends, one that's Christmas Eve and 2 that are Christmas Day.
Someone actually guessed today, but it's my birthday today, not Bob's birthday.
Did they get anything for that, Amber?
They'll get anything for that.
A big old high five. So each day we're going to be giving these $50 gift cards out, but I'm not going to send them out till the last day because who knows, maybe the same person will win the same gift card. So I will email you, I'm a Good Guy, and get your contact information for that. And then, Mike, I think you have a few more things to add.
Yeah, I'll take the next couple of slides here, Bob, but before we get to Q&A. So today, as a follow-up to Bob's presentation about what the CSF is and the value of creating a gap analysis for that, we are offering at no cost to participants today doing one of those gap analysis for you. If you're interested in that, type NIST in the chat. You will earn 250 points, and Amber will follow up so that we can do the analysis and set up that time to work with you through what we're finding, what we found, and give you that actionable information back that you at that point can figure out, will help you prioritize it, and you can figure out what you want to do with it. So again, 250 points for going through a gap analysis with us. Type NIST in the chat box, and we'll reach out and set up a time to do that appropriately. There's a couple of to-dos just want to cover before we jump into the Q&A. So now that we've completed the informational part of today's session, after this closes out, you're going to want to head to www.cthevent.com and participate in challenge number 1. There's a video to watch. And then there's several questions to answer. And each one of those questions will reveal a portion of a clue towards the challenge answer that will be asked at the end. So you're going to want to record your clues along the way, keep a pen and paper along with you. If you get one wrong along the way, leave yourself a blank spot, and you may still be able to figure out the answer by the time you finish. This is a very escape room-esque. And so sometimes it'll take you a little thinking and a little iteration of trying to come up with the right answer to the solution. So think it through before you type your final answer.
Think like a hacker.
Thinking like a hacker. Yes, thank you very much. Tomorrow we have the next session. Session 3 starts at 11 a.m. We'll be covering the next 2 tenets of the cybersecurity framework: protect and detect. Watching an email hijacking takeover presentation. This is a live demo of a three-part presentation. Someone being hacker, someone being hacky, and someone walking us through how to review and evaluate and detect this type of a attack. So it's going to be super cool. Can't wait to see that with help from our friends at Perch.
I just want to add one thing for the challenge. The challenge will open up at 11 a.m. And there's 2 videos and 2 sets of questions. So after you watch the first video and answer the first set of questions, make sure you scroll down, see the next video and the next set of questions. I just want to clarify that part.
Thank you, Amber.
And now we can
So now we can open the floor to questions. Anyone have questions for Bob about the NIST cybersecurity framework? Anything that you have experienced yourselves, things you want to ask about, something that looked weird, or just general questions about how to help identify what's going on in your world, or ways that we might be able to give you a little direction today, make you a little more vigilant.
I have one question that someone might have that they didn't actually ask. Can you just give a quick overview of how the assessment works? Like if I were to say I am interested in doing the assessment with you, can you just give me an overview of like how that happens?
Yeah, sure. So, back in the old days, we probably would think about doing it on site, but that's probably not the way it works today. But we've managed to do these virtually in probably almost every circumstance. Um, I would have to say it is a very informal process. We have one scheduled this afternoon. We're doing a risk assessment for a new client that we are in the midst of onboarding. It is a Q&A process that walks through each of the controls. Yes, it's in detail, and I'll give you an example. So, do you have antivirus in place? I'm hopeful that 100% of the people would have an answer that would be yes. Well, based on the answer to that, it will unfold another question that says, okay, now that you said you have it, do you have it on every machine that's active in your environment? Do you have a way to prove that? And is it updated on X basis? Continuously, every day, every week, every month. And then you can take it one step further. Okay, maybe you've answered yes, and the best possible answer is continuous updating for all of that. Does it use artificial intelligence in order to determine user habits? To determine if something anomalous is going on? I don't know, if this user uploads 100 files to this site every day, I've only seen them upload one, and it's not to that site. Am I going to put an immediate restriction in place? It's typically called, in our world, it's called script control, but it will stop a script from running because it looks out of the ordinary. Those types of questions and answers will evaluate what is currently in place and the strength of what's in place. I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, Amber, but
Yeah, it definitely does. It clarifies what we're explaining that. Yeah,
that's the interaction. Based on your answer, that it may be good enough.
There's a quick little follow-up to that, Bob. How long does the process take? And is it a risk analysis or a gap analysis?
So the risk analysis generates the gap analysis, because we can't make a determination of someone's gaps until we know exactly where they stand baseline wise. So this process takes I've seen them go as fast as 20 minutes. I've seen them take as long as an hour and a half. It depends how much interaction. I think the normal amount of time is probably 30 to 45 minutes to go through the questions in a sequence, with not too much banter going back and forth. I mean, we could drag stuff out as long as we want, but I do think that that's a reasonable amount of time to get it completed. And then from there, it will generate that assessment that will say, okay, here's all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it will map out exactly where the issues reside.
And then just as a follow-up to that, once we gather all this data, Bob then takes it back, goes through it, helps prioritize based upon his conversations with you about your organization, the things that are probably most important to you in your organization, and will present you back with an executive summary report of those findings, so that you can sort of hit the ground running. Is there low-hanging fruit? Are there things that are so glaring that you better handle yesterday, et cetera, et cetera? And he'll walk through that information with you.
I think that's a good way to say it, Mike.
Yeah. Here's another question that came in. Now that we're working from home, how safe are products like Zoom and Ring Central? I've noticed a lot more robot calls and Zoom bombers. That's bombers.
So I think if we were to ask this question 5 months ago, I think we could probably also always say that they could have been better. I think, they were the hardest hit of anybody in the industry when it comes to surprised by this whole thing and the demand for their service. And I think they were a little casual with security. Not that they were running it very loose, but they weren't by default enforcing things like passcodes to entry into a meeting, embedded in that link. If those links get out in the wild, people are going to use them, and that's, people are going to get into these things. But I think they have made it much more difficult. I can't speak for RingCentral, but we use a competitor to RingCentral, a company called Citricom. It's a hosted voice over internet provider. And if you lock your firewall down to their data center, they have the security in place where people aren't going to barge in and steal your calls or hijack your service in order to essentially use your quote unquote lines. Not that it's traditional lines anymore because it's internet, but I think properly configured, I think voice over IP can be reined in. I think the other protections you need to put in place on those types of things are you limiting or completely eliminating the ability to call international? Do you have a real world need to call internationally from your locations, from your users? Sorry, I just stepped on my cat's foot. So if you're, yeah, I can see she's getting antsy. She's getting antsy over here. She wants to go.
Bob, we have another question, and this one is sort of outside the framework, but you may have an answer. If not, maybe we can get the caller one. Anonymous cyberbullying and hate speech on websites, specifically towards children. Do you know if there is a way to report those type of sites to be able to get them either removed or have the hate speech cleaned up?
Oh boy. I don't think I do have an answer right off the top. I mean, does that fall underneath the internet crime guidelines for the FBI? It probably does, but I think it probably has to go, if we're talking about children, is this school related? If it is, during school time and the information's being posted on, something for public consumption around the school, I think the Board of Education's got to get involved. It could go up higher to the state level, but I think eventually stuff like that could make its way to the FBI. I think I could probably do some more research if either if I think about it a little bit more or offline, but those are the first things that come to mind when I think about stuff like that.
Okay. We've got another question here. So he references IDAM1 from the CSF, physical devices and systems within the organization are inventoried, and the references associated for security and privacy controls. The question following that is, do you go so deep to see if controls from these various reference bodies are being satisfied or consequently not satisfied? So when we're looking to see if they're using a control to attempt to satisfy one of the tenets or one of the controls in the framework, and they're referencing things like the CIS, COBIT 5, ISA, etc. Do we go as deep as to see if the various reference bodies are satisfied by what they're putting in place?
Okay, so
Yeah.
So there's probably a two-part answer to this. The first part is we're only able to determine, especially since we're not on site, let's cross that bridge. Number one, we're only able to determine the risk level and the satisfaction of the security in place based on the answers provided. Okay, because this is an interactive, we're asking questions of somebody that's inside the organization that hopefully has the information. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. We're not putting tools onto the network that, at this point anyway, doing a baseline risk assessment to determine whether those tools are functional, are in place, updated, functional, and monitored to provide that level of control. I'll give you for instance, Somebody comes to us, says, let's run through this risk assessment. And we ask them, do you have Microsoft Active Directory for using a domain controller in your server environment? And maybe that's at your place of business, maybe it's in the cloud, doesn't matter. And the answer is yes. Okay, good. Is it controlling your passwords, or are all your passwords set to never expire? And then, some people will stumble over the answer to that question because maybe they don't want to answer it because the answer is ugly, or they just don't know. Yeah, there's probably like 3 accounts in our world that have non-expiring passwords. Okay, we can take the truth. Well, it goes into the form. Okay, are there strong passwords in place? And we can define what a strong password is. Got to be at least 8 characters. In the old days, 8 characters. Got to have a cap. Got to have a number. Got to have a special character. And then obviously, we double that. We're at 16 characters in our world. Where for all of our passwords, and like it or not, change every 90 days. That's another let's say control. And is the system enforcing this? Is Active Directory via group policy forcing all of these things to take place on a regular basis, on a repeatable basis? I think those are the things that will determine whether the control is enforced or not. If somebody's able to answer all those questions to our collective satisfaction, ours and obviously the questionnaire that we've got in place, then I think we can get to, are those controls being satisfied? But it's only as good as the information we're collecting. And look, everybody could believe with those answers that the right controls are in place. Maybe they're not working. They could be on Windows 2008 server, which doesn't enforce anything over, I think it's 14 or 15 character passwords for logins. And that's an out-of-date operating system that's no longer supported by Microsoft. So that's a red flag that goes off in the questionnaire. Are all your operating systems currently under support, quote unquote, Microsoft?
And Bob, if I can just interject for a second, as I'm rereading this question a couple of times, I believe what they're also trying to ask is, by doing this CSF, are we doing a cross-reference grid, for lack of a better description, that says, and you are in or out of compliance for COVID-5? The short answer is no. We do not do a full cross-reference grid for other compliances that you may be subject to. We do have the ability to do those. That is not what we're offering here in the initial gap analysis. This is specifically not about other compliances, although, as Bob mentioned, many of the controls are similar and some are exactly the same between some of them, but we do not provide a cross-reference grid when you're done here that said, in the event you were subject to COVID or PCI or HIPAA or this or that, then you would be covered on those as well.
Mm-hmm.
A great tool if you wanted to build it. Maybe that's a great business opportunity, but that is sort of another set of effort that needs to go through to make sure that it's been cross-referenced that way.
Somebody asked me a question about what I think is one of the most important overlooked things that's relatively, I think it's easy to do. I don't think, and I mentioned this during the presentation, I don't think people are being trained around cybersecurity. I'm not even wanting to say often enough. I know there's a bunch of firms out there that aren't trained at all. They just hope for the best, once a year, twice a year. It has to be something. And I think people have to be tested to see if you've got quote unquote clickers in your organization that are click happy and aren't paying attention. That's a nasty way of saying it, but I think it's maybe true in some circumstances.
So it is 11 o'clock. We have hit our limit. If you guys have additional questions, I don't see any open right now, but please feel free to submit them. Amber's going to put her email address in the chat. And you can submit questions to Amber that we continue to follow up on. We've also got follow-ups for all of the NIST assessments that everybody has requested here. We thank you very much for participation today. Bob, thank you so much for all the valuable information. Amber, it looks like you have something else to say, but I will thank you first for putting together another great day of content.
I do. One is thanks for all the happy birthday messages, guys. And the second is Challenge 1 is now live at cthevent.com. So head on over there after you log off and go do Challenge 1.
Everybody have a great day.
Super. Thanks, everybody.
cthevent.com. Crack
Yep.
the heck.
Crack the heck.